What's going on, people? Today, here, let me fix my mic. Today, I'm going to be talking about the most impressive performances in UFC history, top 10, and the factors that go into these rankings. Public narrative leading up to the fight, which basically means how the public perceived the fighters, who the public thought was going to win, and just overall perception. Dominance, how dominant one fighter was over the other. Odds, obviously I favor the underdog beating a favorite because it shows that the performance was more unexpected, which I value. Context of both fighters, so like their records leading up to the fight. Level of competition, so if it's just two randoms that were fighting, but they're not going to be on this list. Most of these fights are at championship level, and all of them are elite fighters. And stakes of the fight. Most of these fights are championship bouts because I believe not only does that have the highest level of competition, but it shows mentality, which adds to the performance. So starting with honorable mentions, these are just some honorable mentions. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. Great performance, and it was for the BMF belt. However, it just didn't make it onto this list. There were better performances that I could choose from. Petr Yan against Jose Aldo at UFC 251. The argument to make about this is that Jose Aldo wasn't at his best because he was down a division from his prime. So that's why I didn't include that on the list. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway at UFC 308. That's like a really good performance because no one else has knocked out Max Holloway. It's just, in my opinion, Ilia lost the 2 rounds before he knocked out Max Holloway, or at least the round before. Maybe Ilia won the first, but yeah. Max Holloway against Jose Aldo at UFC 212. Again, there are just better performances than this. Trust me, I would include this on the list if I could because Max Holloway is my favorite fighter. John Jones against Cyril Gane at UFC 285. The reason I didn't include this is because we don't really know how good Cyril Gane is compared to top-tier fighters like John Jones because he kind of has just beat like a couple of dudes. So I can't include that. And Ilia Topuria against Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298. Great performance. He knocked out Volk. Just the argument to that is Volk's out of his prime and he was coming off a knockout. So yeah, but let's get into the list. Starting at number 10, we have John Jones versus Daniel Cormier at UFC 182. The reason I included this is not because of domination. It's because this is an extremely high level of competition. Daniel Cormier is a top 5 fighter in my opinion, and he was also undefeated going into the fight and had never lost a single round. John Jones beat Cormier in the striking. He beat him in the grappling. Daniel Cormier had never been taken down prior to the fight, and John Jones took him down 3 times. So yeah, John Jones out-wrestled Daniel Cormier. He outstruck him. And overall, a solid performance from John Jones. I'm pretty sure it was a 50-45 against a top 5 UFC fighter of all time. So that has to go on top 10. Number 9, we got Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa at UFC 253. The reason I chose to include this on the list is because Costa was undefeated going into the fight, and he was coming off great performances. He beat Yoel Romero. He knocked out Uriah Hall and Johnny Hendricks. And Adesanya hadn't looked good in his last fight. He had a worse performance against Romero than Costa did. He had a really boring and lackluster performance. And then in the fight, Izzy dominated Paulo Costa in the striking, and he KO'd him. I forget which strike he KO'd him with, but yeah, that was a masterful performance by Adesanya against high-level competition. So moving on, number 8, Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan at UFC Fight Night 221. Now, I know the stakes of this fight weren't that high. It wasn't a title bout. But Merab was the underdog going into the fight. Petr Yan was coming off of 2 very close decisions to elite fighters. He had arguable robberies to Aljo, who was the current champion at the time, and O'Malley, who was like an elite striker. Merab was the first one to just dominate him. This was a crazy performance. Merab won 50-45. Made Yan look easy. Moving on, number 7, Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya at 293. I had to include this one because Strickland was a plus 450 underdog going into the fight, which is crazy. Many believed Adesanya would win by knockout, but what happened is Strickland negated the striking of Adesanya and walked him down the entire fight. Adesanya was coming off a KO win against Alex Pereira, whereas Strickland had just lost to Pereira by KO in the first round, and he lost a close decision to Cannonier, where he didn't look that good. But in this fight, He just beat Israel Adesanya on the feet. I think Izzy took a round, but Sean Strickland won 49-46 against someone who many people believed was unbeatable. So moving on, we got Volk versus Max Holloway at UFC 276. I don't like this picture. It hurts me to think of this fight because of what happened to Max Holloway, but it happened, and I have to include it. We got to put some respect on my boy Volk. Max Holloway, he was coming off some great performances. He had just put an absolute fucking masterclass on Calvin Kattar. A war with Yair Rodriguez, but it was a dominant war. He definitely beat him. And a lot of people thought that the second fight was a robbery. People thought that Max was going to be able to do the same thing he did in the second fight, but just do it more effectively. I think at the press conference, Max was talking about how he saw something in Volk's game and he was going to be able to knock him out. But what happened is Volk dominated Max in the striking all 5 rounds and outsped him. He was running around Max. He was running circles around Max, just much faster than him. So, yeah, that's number 6. Number 5, Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira at UFC 280. Going into the fight, Islam hadn't faced any elite competition, whereas Charles had a lot of hype and had beaten everyone else in the division. He submitted Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, and he knocked out Michael Chandler, whereas Islam's best wins were Bobby Green and Dan Hooker. Many believed Oliveira would be better in the striking, but what happened is Islam outstruck Oliveira, knocked him down, and jumped on a submission. That's a big reason why I have this on the list, is Islam submitted Charles Oliveira, who had the best jiu-jitsu in UFC. So I have to put this one on. But yeah. Number 4, Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz at UFC 207. This is a slightly overrated performance because I believe Dominic Cruz took a round, but Cody Garbrandt still put a master class against Dominic Cruz, who was the consensus bantamweight GOAT. Dominic Cruz was coming off amazing performances against Uriah Faber and TJ Dillashaw, and Cody Garbrandt going into the fight was a plus 205 underdog, and Dominic Cruz was seen as unbeatable in the bantamweight division. He had beaten prime DJ, he beat TJ Dillashaw, Uriah Faber. So yeah, many people just didn't think Cody Garbrandt could get it done, but what happened is Cody Garbrandt put a masterclass on him. And I think Dominic Cruz might have won 1 round, but overall it was pretty dominant. Cody Garbrandt was doing emotes and shit, and definitely did a lot of damage to Cruz. Moving on. At number 3, we have Kamaru Usman versus Tyron Woodley at UFC 235. Now, this is a underrated performance, I think. I don't think anyone really talks about this. But Usman was a plus 125 underdog going to the fight, and he dominated Woodley and won 50-43, 2 10-8 rounds. And he won in both the striking and the grappling, dominated in both. Tyron Woodley was coming off of great wins against Wonderboy, Damian Maia, and Darren Till. And people believe Woodley was unbeatable. He was looking crazy at welterweight. I think some people even believe that he was going to surpass George St. Pierre as welterweight GOAT. And Usman went in there and dominated him for 5 rounds. Put on an absolute clinic. So, this is definitely going at number 3. Moving on, number 2, we got to put Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez at 205. Utter domination against Eddie Alvarez. He knocked him down 3 times. He showed immense speed. He was much faster than Alvarez. And Alvarez, leading up to the fight, he beat Prime RDA and Anthony Pettis, which, RDA back in the day and Showtime Pettis, they were something else. But nah, Eddie Alvarez was obviously good, but the fact that McGregor knocked him down 3, he was the lightweight champion, and McGregor knocked him down 3 times, and won by like a 4-punch combination that Eddie just didn't see. So yeah, McGregor he was floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee. Number 1, I bet a lot of people watching already know what it is. It's Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo, UFC 194. McGregor knocked out the consensus featherweight GOAT in 13 seconds. McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo, who had beat Chad Mendes twice. He beat Frankie Edgar. He beat Korean Zombie. And he beat a ton of other fucking people. And McGregor put him out in 13 seconds. McGregor was the plus 100 underdog going into the fight, and he literally predicted the outcome of the fight in an interview before the fight, as well as when he was warming up. He did the exact same combo. This is for sure the best performance in UFC history. Jose Aldo, who was the featherweight GOAT, McGregor cracks him and puts him out cold. in 13 seconds. What else can I say? So that was the list, guys. If you enjoyed and you want more videos like this, make sure to, leave a like, subscribe type shit. But yeah.